Okay, hello everyone. All right, so the next program in chapter 6 is circle class. All right, I have a small cold, so sorry if I sound a bit funny. All right, so write a circle class that has the following fields. Radius is going to be a double. Pi is going to be a final double initialized with the value of pi, which is 3.14159. The class should have the following methods. Constructor accepts the radius of the circle as an argument. Another constructor, which is going to be a no-arg constructor, that sets the radius field to 0.00. So the first constructor accepts an argument. The second constructor accepts no argument. setRadius is going to be a mutator method for the radius field. getRadius is going to be an accessor method for the radius field. getArea is going to return the area of the circle, which is calculated as the area is equal to pi times radius, okay, or pi r squared. Get diameter returns the diameter of the circle, which is calculated as the diameter is equal to radius times 2, or 2r. Get circumference returns the circumference of the circle, which is calculated as circumference is equal to 2 times pi times radius, or 2 pi r. Write a program that demonstrates the circle class by asking the user for the circle's radius, creating a circle object, and then reporting the circle's area, diameter, and circumference. All right. So we've been told everything here, all the constructors, the mutators, the accessors, and the fields. So all we have to do is create it. So we're going to create two separate files. One file is going to contain the class, and another file is going to contain the program that is going to test the class. Okay, so this is going to be the file that is going to contain the class. So I'll start creating the class here. All right, so to create the class, I'm going to start with the keyword public class, and then I'll use the name of the class. In this case, it's a circle class. So public class circle. It's public because I want this class to be accessible to code that is outside of this class. For example, the code that we're going to write in a separate file that is going to use this class is code that is outside of this class. So I'm making it public because I want this class to be available to code that is outside of this class, right? So let's start with the fields. Now, radius is going to be one of the fields. It's going to be a double, so we know that. But I'm going to define it as a private double, private double, and I'm going to call it radius. The reason I'm declaring it as a private variable is because I want this field to be hidden from code that is outside of this class, meaning I don't want code outside of this class to be able to directly see the content of this variable or change the content of this variable. I want it to use other means to change it or see the content of it, but I don't want it to directly, set a value, change its value, or see the content of its value. So I'm hiding it from code that is outside of this class. Any code that is not part of this class is not going to be able to see the content of this radius file directly or change the content of it directly. It will make more sense as we go. I want code outside of this class to be able to use the private methods that we are about to declare or create to see content from this class. To see content from this variable or to change the content of this variable. Okay, so that's why I'm making it private. I'm hiding this variable from code that is outside of this class and only making it accessible to code inside of this class. So for that matter, all the variables are going to be private. All right. So private double radius. The second field is going to be a final double. Okay, in other words, a constant initialized with the value 3.14159. So I'm going to basically create a private. Let's see. Hold on one second. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to try to make it a private and see. Okay, so private final double. We'll see if it gives us a. I think it's going to give us an error, but it's fine. So private final double. I'm going to call this pi, and initialize it with a value of, let's say, 3.14159. So 3.14159. 159. 3.14159. All right. Okay, so I'm making all these fields private because, again, I want to hide it from code outside of this class. I want code outside of this class to be able to use the public methods I'm about to define right now to see the content of these variables, or at the same time change the content of these variables. So now we're done with the fields. Now let's move to the methods in the class, from the constructors, accessors, mutators. All right, so the first constructor we're going to create is going to accept the radius of the circle as an argument. Okay, and it's going to set the radius to that value. So to create a constructor, okay, I'm going to make that public because I want it to be available now to code outside of this class. I want code outside of this class to be able to use that constructor to create an object from this class. So that's why I'm making it public now. So public. Now the constructor does not have any return type because we are not the ones who call this method. It's called automatically when someone tries to create an object from this class. Because we do not call it ourselves, because we do not call it explicitly, it cannot return a value, and that's why it has no return type when you are declaring it or when you are creating it. Okay, and it also does not have the keyword static. Okay, in this case we're not going to put the keyword static. So public is just the keyword public, or basically the access modifier, and then the name of the constructor. Now the name of the constructor has to be the same as the name of the class. In this case, the name of the class is circle, so the constructor is going to be called circle. It's just like a regular method, but again, it doesn't have the keyword static and it doesn't have a return type. The constructor. Okay, so the constructor accepts the radius of the circle as an argument. So we know it's going to accept the radius of the circle as an argument. So I'm going to define a parameter for the radius of the circle. So I'm going to define a parameter which is going to be, we know radius is a double, so I'm going to define a double radius given, because that's going to be a radius given. Okay, so I'm giving it the name of radius given. And then the radius field is going to be initialized or set to the radius given value. So that's what this constructor is going to do. All right. Now let's move on to the next constructor, which is a no-arg constructor that sets the radius field to 0.00. In other words, a constructor just like this that accepts no argument. Okay, so no argument, and it sets the radius field to 0.00. So it's just going to be like this one. I'm just going to copy it. Oops, undo. All right. Okay, so it's going to be like this one. I'm going to paste it. It's not going to accept any argument, so it's no argument. But it sets the radius field to 0.00. To 0.00. So now radius, instead of becoming radius given, becomes 0.0. 0.0. So we're done with that too. Now again, the name of the constructor has to be the same as the name of the class. All right, so the next thing we're going to set is going to be a mutator method for the radius field. So the mutator method is just basically going to set the value of the radius field. That's what code outside of this class is going to use to set the value of the fields. They cannot directly go to the field and change it. They have to use a public method to change. Okay, they have to use a public method we're about to create to change these private fields. Okay, so it's going to be a mutator, right? So basically a mutator or a setter. We know it's called setRadius. Now a mutator method is just like a regular method. The only difference with a mutator method is that it does not have the keyword static. Okay, now when we are creating regular methods, you just say public static void or public static doubles or public static strings. With mutator methods, you don't add a keyword static. Why? Because they are instance methods. An instance method is any method that acts directly on an object. Sorry, actually it's the same thing, but I just want to rephrase it. An instance method is a method that acts on the fields. Okay, that acts directly on the fields of an object that is created from this class, right? So because the instance method we are going to set or define, we are about to define, is going to set the radius, because it's working directly on the fields of an object that is going to be created from this class. It's an instance method. And with instance method, you don't add the keyword static. So just for now, just put it in your head that with instance method, you don't add the keyword static. Later on in chapter 8, when we get into the book in chapter 8, you'll find out more, or basically you know why. But for now, just know that instance methods don't have the keyword static. All right, so it's just like a regular method apart from that. So setRadius it's going to be a public method, because again, that is the method that code outside of this class is going to use to set the value of the fields of an object created from this class. Okay, so public, again, no static. Now we have to specify the return type. If we are setting the if we are setting the radius, then we are setting it with a new value, right? So that means that this method is going to accept an argument, all right? So when you think about it, it's setting, it's going to accept an argument, and it's setting the radius field with the value that the user has given to it. That's all. It's not returning anything. All it's doing is it's setting it. It's mutating it. It's changing it, right? It's setting its value. So it's not returning anything. So in this case, the return type is going to be a void, meaning it's returning nothing. Public void. Okay, it's returning. If it's returning nothing, you specify a void return type. No static keyword, so public void, and then the name of the method is going to be setRadius. Right, we know it's going to accept an argument. Right, and that argument is it's going to be a value, right? It's going to be a radius value. So I'm just going to call this radius given. Oops, I need to specify the type. We know radius is going to be a double. Okay, double. So double radius given. It's going to accept a radius given, and when it gets that value, it's going to set the radius field to radius given. That's the mutator for setRadius. All right. GetRadius is going to be an accessor or a getter. Okay, a getter. So an accessor is basically going to get the value of it. So it's also going to be a public method, because that's the code that code outside of this class is going to use to see the value of the values of these fields, right? So let's go ahead and do that also. Let's create that accessor. It's also an instance method, so that it doesn't have the static keyword, right? Well, let's create it from scratch. Okay, so it's going to be a public method. We have to set the return type. If we are getting the value of radius, right? This method is going to be defined in such a way that it's going to return the value. So if we call it, then it returns the value of a radius. So because it's going to return the radius, we know the radius is a double variable or a double value. We know the return type is going to be a double, so we have to specify a return type of double. So public double, right? And we give the name, or basically we specify the name, which has been told us here that it's getRadius. Now getRadius is not going to accept any arguments, because when you think about it, all it's doing is it's returning the value of radius here. So once this method is called, all we want it to do is return radius this way. Okay, getRadius, just return the radius of that particular object, which is created from this class. All right. Now the next thing is going to be getArea. The next method is going to be getArea. This is going to be a regular method, and getArea is going to return the area of the circle, which is calculated as area is equal to pi times radius times radius, right? So let's start defining it. It's also going to be a public method, okay, but it's not. We have to specify the return type. GetArea is going to basically return something. GetArea, once we call it, it's going to return the area of that particular circle object. So when you think about it, the area can be a double, right? Basically, after the calculation, it can be a double value. Okay, so it will be wise for us to set the return type to double. Sorry for my code. I sound a bit weird and funny. All right, so public double, because that's a return type, getArea. And getArea is not going to accept any arguments, because when you think about it, all it's doing is getting the value of area. But you would think that, oh, we don't have a field here called area, so how are we going to, you would think that, oh, it would be wise for us to create a field here called area and then set area to the result of the calculation here. When we do that, that can result in something called still data. If you define a variable here called area, you set area is equal to this calculation. If the values of these fields, the radius changes, the results in the area field is no longer accurate, right? It's no longer accurate. It's going to be stale. Okay, you can have stale data. So it would be wise for us to not define an area field, but just to return the result of the calculation here. So instead of creating a field here called area and then setting area to be equal to this, okay, again, if the values of the fields changes, you're going to end up having stale data, okay? That value may be inaccurate, okay? It may be inaccurate. So you don't want to do that. You want to just go ahead and return the calculation of this result, and then you're always going to have the accurate result. So public double getArea is going to go ahead and return pi times radius times radius. Okay, so pi, which we have up here, times radius times radius. That's it. Okay, all right. Now get diameter is going to be something very similar. It's going to be, we're not going to define a field called diameter and store the result in there like that. We're going to define the method to just return radius times 2. So let's go ahead and copy this. It's going to be a public double also. Call this get diameter, and it's going to return radius times 2. So it's going to be radius times 2 this way, and we're done. Okay, the last one is going to be get circumference, something very, very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and paste it. It's also going to be a double. It's going to return a double. So public get circumference, and it's going to return the result of the calculation. We're not going to define a field called circumference. We're just going to return the calculation of the result of the calculation 2 times pi times radius. So it's going to be 2 times pi times radius. Okay. And then we're done. And then we're done. We're done creating the class. Now, I like to have my it doesn't matter, but I like to have my constructors below. It doesn't really matter. We can leave it like this. But I like to have my, actually, you know, sometimes I mix it around. Sometimes I have my constructors above and then the rest below. But sometimes I like to have them here as well, like as the last thing in the class, this way. And then I have my mutators, my accessors, and then my constructors. I mean, mutators, accessors, methods, other methods, and then constructors. Yeah, I like to have this as well. So now we're done creating the class. Now we have to write a program that demonstrates the circle by asking the user for the circle's radius, creating a circle object, and then reporting the circle's area, diameter, and circumference. So that's what we're going to do in another file. And as long as both files are in the same folder, they're going to be able to compile and see each other and work with each other that way. As long as those files are in the same folder, the program and then the class. Okay, so let's compile this and see if we have any errors. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder in where I save all the Java files. Call this circle class. And then save this as circle.java. Okay, it compiled without any errors, so that's good. All right, so now let's create a new file. I'm going to first copy this question so I can paste it there as well, so I don't come back and forth. I mean, we will come back and forth, but I just like to have that question in the new file as well. Paste it here, and then I'll create the new program. We're just going to use this circle class. When you think about it, this is not a complete program. This is just a class. If you try to run it, it's going to give you an error because it doesn't have a main method. It's not a complete program. It's just a class that another program is going to use. So now we're going to create a regular program that is going to use this class. So I'm going to go ahead and create a public class, and I'll call this circle class, or basically circle test. Okay, circle test. I should have called this probably circle, yeah, I don't know, it's fine. I'll just say circle test. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and create my main method. So public public static void main. Okay. All right, now I have my class, I have my main method. Now it says write a program that demonstrates the circle class by asking the user for the circle's radius. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's ask the user for the circle's radius. Let's use the scanner for this one, okay? Because I used actually let's use the G option pane. So because it looks nice sometimes, right? So let's go ahead and use the G option pane to do that. All right, so to use the G option pane, we first have to import the G option pane class so that this program can have access to it. Right, so to import it, we have to type the statement import javax.swing. So javax.swing is the package, and then G option pane. The G option pane class is located there. So we are importing the G option pane class located in the javax.swing package. And with the G option pane, you don't have to create an object. All you have to do is just go ahead and use it, unlike this kind of class. So let's ask the user a question using the G option pane's show input dialog. So G option pane dot show inputs dialog, and this is basically going to pop up at some kind of a dialog box asking the user something, and then requiring an input. So let's tell the user to please enter the circle's radius here. So please enter the circle's radius. Right, now the G option pane, whatever the user types into the G option pane, always returns a string. No matter what, it always returns a string. Even if the user types in a number, which of course, when you're asking the radius, the user is going to go ahead and type a number. It's going to go ahead and return a string because that's how it works. So we have to go ahead and convert. If we really want a number, we have to go ahead and convert whatever the user has typed, which has been converted to a string. We have to go ahead and convert it to a number ourselves. Okay, so even if the user types in a number, let's say 2, that 2 is going to be returned as a string 2 and not as a number 2, string 2. We'd have to go ahead and convert it ourselves. So I'm going to go, because it by default it always returns a string, I'm going to go ahead and create a string variable and call it user input string. User input string is basically going to store what the user has typed here initially because it always returns a string. So user input string is what is going to be stored in over here. So the number or whatever the user typed in here as a string is going to be stored here. Now we are going to go ahead and convert what is stored here now to a number so we can use it. To do that, we are going to use one of the methods in Java's wrapper classes, which is in later chapters in the book. Okay, we're not there yet, but there are methods in Java's wrapper classes that we can use to do that. So to convert it to a double in this case, because radius we know is a double, right? So to convert it to a double, we're going to say double.parse double, and what we are passing to a double is going to be the content of user input string. Okay, so basically what we are doing is we are passing into a double the content of user input string. Okay, what we are passing into a double is user input string. Okay, or in other words, user input string is being passed to a double, and once it's passed into a double, we need a place to store it. So now we need a double variable called user radius. Right? I'm going to call it user radius, and user radius is basically going to store the result of the conversion of what is stored in user input string to a double. Okay, so after the user's input string, which is a string, has been converted to a double, so it's going to be stored in user radius. That's going to be the user radius, right? So now we have the user radius as a number because we know that by default the JOption pane always returns a string. We had to convert it to a double and store it here. Okay,